Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wee Ood, an unofficial Doctor Who podcast. My name is Ben. I'm here with my co-host Cam. How are you doing today, Cam?
I'm doing, I would say wonderful, Ben. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. I'm surprised you're wonderful, considering what you just watched.
See, been playing a lot of Dave the Diver recently, and that's just been wonderful to play, Ben. I've been very much enjoying playing that. And I had the weather's gotten nice out.
It
It's been much, and then
has.
we had the time change, so it's been sunnier for more of the day, so that impacted my mood slightly. How are you doing, Ben?
I'm good. I'm good. So today we're going to be talking about the Doctor Who episode Colony in Space, which is the fourth serial of season 8, originally premiering between April 10th and the 15th of May, 1971. Cam, do you have any fun facts about this wonderful episode?
Wonderful is very strong language. So just to start off with the credits, writer was Malcolm Hulk, who did last season. He did the Doctor Who and the Silurians, and he did a rewrite on the Ambassadors of Death. He then goes on next season to do the Sea Devils, and then he also does Frontier and Spice. This is the first episode that's done by Michael Bryant, who will go on to do the Green Death, and he will also do another pretty well regarded episode, Robots of Death.
Hmm.
And then for the fun facts, fun fact that I found out is for the assistant floor managers for this episode, it was two familiar faces that you will get to know in a couple of months from now. Graham Hopper was one of them, who will go on to direct Caves of Androzani in the classic show, and goes on to direct multiple of the season finales for the new show, and does a couple of great episodes there as well. And then another one is John Nathan Turner, who will go on to be the Doctor Who's producer for all of the 80s. So I just thought it was interesting that both of them were at the lowest of the low in the totem pole, and will go on to be very influential for this show.
Interesting.
Another fun fact is this is one that I believe, Ben. I might be getting this wrong, okay? So this is just something that I'm gonna throw out there. So I believe, if I remember correctly, in some interview, Ben Ivanovich, who will go on to write Remembrance of the Daleks and Battlefield, he mentioned in some interview that one of the first things, one of his first Doctor Who memories was either, I forget if it was reading the target for this or if it was watching it, because his parents were communists. And I don't know if we discussed this at all during Doctor Who and the Silurians, but the writer for this episode, Malcolm Hulk, was a full-on member of the Communist Party.
Really?
So, because of his parents were being communists and the Malcolm Hulk connection, this was one of his first experiences with Doctor Who. Did you when you watched this episode, did you think, oh yeah, the communists wrote this episode?
I can't say that that thought came to mind. Although now that you say that, I guess I kind of see it. It's very much like trying to stick it to the government and stick it to the oppressors, trying to take things back into your own hand.
British colonialization, of course.
Sure, yeah.
And then, like always, just to discuss some of the titles, the working title for this was The Colony, and the target novelization for this changed it to Doctor Who and the Doomsday Weapon, which is kind of weird because this story, at the end of it, is all about that Doomsday Weapon, even though it only is mentioned at the beginning and then is comes back into the plot at the very end.
Yeah, I would say it's more about the colony. The doomsday weapon's kind of incidental even though it's the ultimate reason why things are happening.
Yeah. Um. So that's it for fun facts, man.
Uh, Not very fun.
No.
I don't know. I'm assuming you haven't looked into it. I did a very cursory glance. Are there any action figures for this episode?
There's no action figures for this episode. I wish,
God damn it.
I guess we can do this if there's no action figures. Like you could do an action figure of the. We'll talk about it, but like the ruler of the
Yeah, the
civilization, the
little
little guy.
guy. on his throne would be a good little action figure.
And then another thing would have been like that machine, that's used to kill people.
Mhm.
I don't know, I forget the name of it, but you know what I'm talking about with the claw.
Yeah. I could see, like, the little dune buggies being something too. The IMC buggies there. I could see them making models out of that.
And a cool action figure would have been the master and the gear of the I'm having a blank.
The adjudicator?
Adjudicator, like get up. That would have been a cool figure.
Mhm.
But yeah, that like they didn't make any because this is not a particular strong story.
Can't believe this isn't gonna go down as one of the all-time classics of Doctor Who. Astonished. So let's just jump into it then. Cam, what did you think of Colony in Space?
I think there's only one word that comes to mind, and that's boring. It's a very generic thing to call something. Like, I wish I could have other words to describe this serial,
Mhm.
but for the majority of it, I found a hard time concentrating on it, having any reasons to care about what was going on in the plot and the story. Even from like halfway point, I thought it started out strong. Like the when we see the Time Lords, and then when we see the Joe's first introduction to the TARDIS, and then going to an alien planet.
Oh, yeah. I think the first episode is definitely one of the better ones, where it's introducing these new concepts.
Something that came out to me, while Joe was going through this is that Shaw never experienced any of this.
Yeah, she never got to go in the TARDIS.
She never went in the TARDIS, she never went to an alien world, like, she got gypped being a Doctor Who companion, Ben.
Maybe in Probe.
But, like, there's some like, this of course, we have to talk about it, like, this is the first time that we get a quarry in color, Ben. Isn't
Yeah.
it so beautiful?
It's the very first alien planet in color, and the color they chose is gray, which doesn't really leave a strong impression, but
No.
when you have just a quarry to work with, I suppose
It's alien-looking planet enough.
it's a good mining planet, I guess. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, it's just one of those stories that I just don't think I'm ever gonna watch again.
You're not waiting on the Blu-ray restoration?
There is, I watched it, and
Oh, yeah. I
the
guess, yeah, season 8 already had a Blu-ray.
the crazy thing about this, Ben, is that on the Blu-ray, there isn't just one copy of Colony in Space. There's 2 copies of Colony in Space.
Oh, did they do, like, CGI improvements or something?
No, so there's a whole separate disc. I don't know understand this in particular, but the for some reason there's the 2020 like the 2021 restoration on the first disc. And on the second disc for Colony in Space, it's the 2011 restoration, which I don't know why you would need that. It's called like let me look it up. It is the reverse standard conversion version of the serial. Why the hell is there 2 discs? I have no idea. I don't know why anyone would want that second version.
Want, like, is it a different way that the episode was restored, or is it just, like, objectively inferior, the older version?
Oh, so I was just like went on to Reddit, and Reddit says, to give him credit, Murga Man 4 said that basically the one version is the 2021 version, I would imagine, would be the higher quality, but is missing some of the frame because they had like we didn't have all the frame, and then the other version is lesser quality, but we get the full frame. So that's why there's 2 discs. Why like it's so that's why I have to give a shout out to like the Blu-ray team for the collection sets because they do a great job with that. Like I don't know that many fandoms that would have when we have Star Wars that we're not even able to watch the original movies, and then Doctor Who's over here just being like, "We're just gonna give you
Yeah,
the 2 versions of the restoration on the 2 different Blu-ray discs." Like
yeah. Both of them are have problems in different ways. You figure out which one you prefer.
that's pretty cool on them, even though they are. expensive.
Disney would never.
I was reading some of the fan thoughts on this episode, and it seemed like it's kind of mixed. Of some people say when the master comes, it completely ruins the story, and then some people say when the master shows up, the story is greatly improved. I feel like it's indifferent. I just felt like even when the master shows up, there's a when the master does show up, there's a couple of great scenes with him and the doctor in particular. Like the last pot has some great dialogue,
Yeah.
which we're gonna have to get into. But then throughout the majority, I'm just like, I do not care about what's happening in this colony with the miners in the colony, and then we have this ancient race that's the race of this planet. I just did not care, and I just blanked out for majority of it. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. What did you think of it, Ben?
Yeah. I think I told you beforehand that, like, I finished watching it, before you did. I watched it, I think 1 or 2 a day for 3, 4 days in a row. I told you it was not gonna be a good binge for, like, 2 hours before we record, which is what you did.
No, all right, to get it all out there. What I did was on Friday, I watched one pot. Today, I woke up, watched one pot, did errands, came back, watched 3 pots. Then I watched 2 pots early this morning, then watched 2 pots. No, I'm not doing the math right. But basically I spaced them out throughout the day. So it wasn't that bad.
Okay.
I don't think that I feel like that the way watching a majority in one day did not hurt the story that much, because I think if I split this out throughout the week, I still would have thought the same thing. It would have just been more prolonged.
Gotcha. Yeah, my thoughts, it definitely isn't good. I didn't hate it, though. I have a letterbox, as you do, and I like looking ahead at all the scores for upcoming episodes, and I saw that 3.2, 3 point whatever it is, and I had very, very low expectations, and I thought, at the end of it, wasn't that bad. Like, it's not great. I liked it more than The Claws of Axos, even though I know you much prefer it, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Just it being a 4-potter versus 6-potter, like, maybe I would have enjoyed this more with the 4-potter, but even that, it's like, I think that the Axos was just more engaging throughout, even if even if, let's say, both of them were 5 pots, I think I would have still preferred Axos.
yeah, I thought this one, the aliens were kind of interesting, but I also appreciated that I think for the first time the enemies are just men, just the establishment trying to take away what's rightfully ours, and the doctor putting a stop to that. With the master there, he definitely has some good moments. I think he's about as good in this as he is in the Claws of Axos, where he just kinda shows up halfway through and doesn't really add a whole lot, or I don't know. He does do stuff.
Something that I don't understand in this episode, right? It's a master story, right? We get from the start that, hey, we have to send the doctor there because of the master.
Yeah, yeah, we know that right away.
But it takes halfway to get to the master. It's like, why? Did the Time Lord just be like, all right, we have to send him back at least a day before the master shows up, or 2 days. I don't know, like the timeline, but we should send him back a little bit before the master shows up, so he has some time to to understand his surroundings.
Yeah, how long is it before the master actually shows up?
He shows up in pot 4, so it's more than halfway throughout the story.
I thought the beginning bit with the Time Lords was kind of interesting, though. Seeing just drip feeding tiny little bit of Gallifrey.
Yeah, it's very much the same sense of when we saw them in Terror of the Autons.
Yeah.
But, like, something I wanted to discuss is, like, Malcolm Hulke as a writer, right? I think he is somebody that has a lot of good ideas. Like this in the Silurians, and then I don't know. It's hard to just say how much of Ambassadors' death is his. But like, I don't know if you could speak more on the Faceless Ones because I have not seen the Faceless Ones. But like, he seems like somebody that has a lot of good ideas. I just feel like I would have wished that some of his execution was stronger, because I think in this story in particular, like the whole idea of the colony, and then the colony versus the miners is a great conflict, and having the miners basically frame the indigenous people on like the murdering the colony. I think that's a strong concept for a story. It's just the pacing just isn't there, in my opinion. What do you
Yeah.
think of that?
I would agree with that. I have seen The Faceless Ones, and I would say it's a similar thing, where he comes up with a really cool kinda central concept, but then it has to be like a 6 or 7-parter, so there's a lot of meandering, and it is just not paced well, and the story really suffers as a result of that.
And then, of course, Silurians, which we discussed already, like that had a very similar problem too. Of like, there was a lot of great ideas in that one, and really, like that one had even more better ideas than I would say Colony, but that one still had like pretty bad pacing issues.
Yeah, definitely. What did you think of the TARDIS in this episode? In Claws of Axos, we saw just like the corner of the TARDIS next to the door. We do a lot more of where like you can see outside from inside of the TARDIS and you can see into the TARDIS from outside, which is cool. But I know why they just showed that corner because when now we see the whole TARDIS, like the other walls are just flat. They're not actually modeled roundels.
And like something that maybe would have you could have got away with in black and white, but once we're in color, it really looks bad.
Yeah.
And like the it's that problem of I have a classic Who sometimes, which we're gonna say this throughout the classic show, is that there's some episodes that like they build the filled set and the filled set looks amazing and it's like, oh wow, this really looks like you would be, this looks like a spaceship and it looks like something that you would enter and you would be amazed by. But then there's other moments where you're like, this looks like they have no space in the studio and they have to make a tire set like in 2 seconds with 3 walls.
Yeah.
And this one is kind of, I would say, in the middle,
Yeah.
but it's not the worst. There's definitely other times in that it looks smaller, but it's not this thing that you would enter and be like, "Oh my god, it's bigger on the inside. This is magic." You're like, "Oh, it's slightly bigger."
Yeah. I'm glad they decided to bring they have like an actual TV as the scanner now instead of having one of the roundels be a scanner, which was silly in Claws of Axos. And we have finally see the inside of the Master's TARDIS, which is similar but different. It has a lot more just like stuff, file cabinets and bookshelves, and giant tubes for some reason.
And is the color a little bit different? It's like a little bit more green?
Yeah, it's a little bit more browner. Or actually, I don't know.
Like, to me, I would say it's a little bit more green and like, yeah, maybe you would say a little bit more brown.
It feels like a little bit just grungier. Like the outside is red, which somehow that kind of bled into the inside feeling redder for me for some reason.
Hmm.
But just looking at pictures, yeah, it is I think more kind of green and blue.
Yeah, it's for me, it's definitely much more green. It's fine. It's I like the when you see it later on, the Master's TARDIS is black. And I like that like yin and yang, and that that the Doctor's TARDIS is this white ship, and then the Master's is this black.
It's always funny to me that the TARDIS has a key and it's just like a metal house key. It's not like anything ornate or fancy. It's just like a little key that you would like open a file cabinet with.
Which is something they do, that it's mixed. There's sometimes that it's like they have a TARDIS key that's like a that is more of a, like, design, and then there's other times where it is just a your standard key.
Hmm.
And then something else that this episode brought up, and if we're talking about the TARDIS, is that they take the TARDIS away at for a moment,
Yeah.
and it made me realize of just, like, I always get confused of, like, not confused, I should say, but I always just wonder, like, how heavy is the TARDIS? Like, I could imagine, like, the TARDIS being, like, the most heaviest thing on the planet, and then there's other times where it seems like it's pretty easy for, like, 4 or 5 guys to pick it up and put it on a truck.
Yeah, it gets moved around. Not all the time, but a couple of times.
Like, what I'm asking is it this the weight of a
The weight of a big wood box.
like no, but I just looked it up actually. In the fourth Doctor, you're gonna see it like the third Doctor actually has a unique key at some point, and then the fourth Doctor has a unique key, and then it goes back to being a normal key, and then it goes back to having a unique key, and then the new series happens, and it's back to being a just a standard key.
I can't make up their mind.
No, but there's something I kind of like that it is just the mundanity of the TARDIS just being a normal key to enter. It's just a normal ass looking key. But yeah, Colony of not Colony of Axos, Colony in Space, Ben. What did you think of like the indigenous people?
They were interesting. The costumes were okay.
I would say terrible.
They're not that bad. I mean, the very obvious zipper lines. I thought the kinda leader there, where they have, like, a puppet, I think it is, that was pretty cool.
Highlight of the story. That's my favorite. That was my favorite scene. I was giggling when they started speaking. I was in love with this thing, Ben. This is the highlight. If I watch clips from this episode, it's gonna be about the little leader who just being like, "Yeah, doctor." Like I loved it, man.
Mhm.
I'm a simple man. It's adorable.
He is adorable.
Like that could be Baby Yoda if they decided to bring back the indigenous people of colony in
Who
space.
knows? Who knows what the 15th Doctor will hold?
No balls, Russell. Do it. But like it's hard to describe like my thoughts of this story in detail because it's like I mentioned before is that I love the if you told me like there's a Doctor Who story and you gave me this basic idea like the bullet points, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's a Doctor Who story that I would watch and I would find it engaging and that sounds like it could be a great Doctor Who story. But then in execution, I am just from basically the moment they stepped foot and started talking to the colonization, I was just did not care about what was happening in the plot.
Yeah. I thought the colonists themselves did a pretty good job, like, the actors, with
Yeah,
what they're given, of course.
yeah, like this I would say like in I would say that yeah, for the majority of the acting for the story was pretty good. There wasn't anyone that you're saying, wow, that person is not able to act. Um, trying to think of what else to say about the story, Ben. Do you have anything you want to talk about?
Uh, I'm reminded a lot of the Space Pirates,
Interesting.
where it's like the kind of these two forces, the rebels and the establishment facing off against each other, back and forth. This is better than the Space Pirates, though. Similar kind of vibes, though, kind of grungy.
There is something that ties them together. I think in like in some novelization, there is a link between the space pirates and the story.
Yeah, you're looking at the wiki.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
the
Coincidentally, I started reading The Menagerie last night. It is not mentioned the IMC yet, though.
to just go into some small details. A line that that stood out to me in this episode was when the doctor is going to the miners and they talk about his clothing and they said the line of all colonists are eccentric, Morgan. Otherwise, they wouldn't be colonists.
Mhm.
Which I thought was a great piece of dialogue. And there was another moment where Joe was like, crap, I didn't write it down. But there was something where Joe said like the exact thing that was happening. That was like, Joe, we didn't need that. We knew. We know, Joe. It was like, oh no, I think it was like, I remember now. The Joe was like the doctor when it's found out that that they took the TARDIS and that the TARDIS is missing. She's like, we're not going to be able to leave this planet now. It's like we know, Joe. We know that you're not
Uh,
able to leave
you just
without the
reminded
TARDIS.
me of the moment in episode 1 where they're walking around and Joe says, "All right, let's just go back to the TARDIS." And the doctor says, "All right, Joe, let me just look at this rock first." And he picks up a rock and he's like, "Oh, yes, It's very interesting." And Joe's like, "Oh my, there's a primitive." Very kind of staged. I guess that's not one thing we could talk about. Probably the best part of this episode is, Joe's first adventure out of Earth and how much she kind of is scared and wants to go home. And the doctor keeps pushing to explore. He has his insatiable curiosity, and he has been stuck on Earth for a long time. But even still, although I guess you could say that about almost any Doctor Who story, where he'd be better off if he just dematerialized again.
A moment that stood out to me about this being Joe's first adventure in space was when she was speaking to one of the colonists, and she was like, they were like, "Oh yeah, this is the Vage back in 1971," and then she was like, "Oh, 1971," and then it was like, "No, 2,271." Joe, they weren't colonizing another planet in 1971.
No, that just shows her inexperience, I suppose. I wonder if anyone has made like a timeline. I surely they have of Doctor Who because we have a lot of stuff that is like in the present and a lot of stuff that's in the future and how all those things line up. Like in 2040 something, the Daleks will invade Earth, kill everybody. In I think like the 22nd century, you know, they invent transporters essentially called T-mats, which are referenced in other places.
But Ben, you're hitting an area of Doctor Who that it's dangerous, and people will spend a long time about it, a long time researching it. There's scholars out there that's just devoted to this, and it's called unit dating. Because as I think I informed you that like this whole era is not taking place in the 70s. No, Ben, this is in the 80s. This is in the future,
Mhm.
but it's also has contemporary they're also just living in like it's not like it's like 80s fashion or 80s like anything. It's just this is the 70s.
Mhm.
They have 70s technology, but
So
it's
what
also the
happens
80s.
when it's the 80s in real life? Is like the fourth Doctor when he's in air quotes present day Earth is at the 90s or is it still the 80s?
Who the fuck knows, Ben? Who the fuck knows? In and then there's a lot of things in Doctor Who history, of course, of what happened, what didn't happen.
True. Canon I know is very vague.
And the new show especially because there's a couple of resets and a couple of like just oh yeah, nobody remembers that or people like if you did a timeline of all of Doctor Who, it's a mess, Ben. Because remember, in Ambassadors of Death, they went into space to like almost to Mars. Or they did go to Mars in Ambassadors of Death. But like in the new show, in 2040 they go to Mars for the first time. So it's like it's an area that just don't think about it, man. Don't think about the
Ah, now I
timeline.
kind of want to make a timeline though. At least like going through what I've experienced, I bet I could make like an interesting timeline. Like, oh, this is when the Doctor was in the Wild West. Although a lot of stuff is like undated. Like, who even knows when the Daleks happened?
But then it's also just like who in the hell knows when Spearhead from Space happens? We just know it's some point in the 80s.
Oh, I totally. We should have mentioned this. He does a lot of
Yeah.
Venusian karate, and he's like, oh, I, ah, just like a lot of like yelling, and he gets to beat people up quite a bit. Very wonderful.
So Ben, I mentioned earlier, but I would say one of the strengths I want to get what you think of it was that moment in pot 6 when the doomsday machine is about to happen, and then the master and the doctor have that conversation of just like
Oh,
their
yeah.
relationships with each not their relationships, but their perspectives on the world. And there's like that great moment where where the master is like, "Come on, rule with me. We could be basically these gods. We could rule the universe." And the doctor's just like, "No, but I don't want to rule the universe. I want to see it." What did you think of that moment?
I totally forgot about that, but yeah, that's a great moment.
It's a great moment that shows, like, these 2 characters, like, ideologies and, like, what their perspective is on the universe and why they do what they do. And like, I think that that is such a great way to describe the Doctor, that the Doctor is not somebody that wants to do anything except for to see the universe and, of course, save the universe in a way.
Could you think of it that, like, the master obviously has a very different method, but is trying to accomplish the same thing? That maybe their goals are aligned in some manner? You know, he wants to fix the universe in a sense by being all powerful and creating change himself.
See, it depends on the version of the Master. I would say that you could say that about Dargada's Master. There's a couple of Masters that are just
Just maniacally cackling evil.
They just they just wanna be evil. They just wanna be
Yeah.
evil, man. That's just what that's all they wanna do.
From these 4 stories now so far, I wouldn't say that the master is just 100% cartoonishly evil.
No, and that's one of the strong things about Doug Gotter's interpretation of the role, and is an aspect of the character I wish that other versions will take, but we kind of now gotten to the point, as you will see, that the master is just more, "I'm crazy and evil, and I just wanna be bad. I'm crazy."
Yeah.
But Delgado's master isn't crazy. Delgado's master is just kinda he's plodding away, trying to rule the universe. Okay, Ben. We're just gonna move on straight to the cliffhangers because we're picking at sand here
Yeah,
when
we're
it comes
getting
to
this.
talking about the story. So the cliffhangers, part one, the machine comes to kill the
Oh,
doctor.
no.
Part two, Ben, you're never gonna guess it. The doctor is held at gunpoint and the machine points at no, he's held at gunpoint after figuring out that the machine like the way he's held at gunpoint and by the machines, like the machine's gonna kill him after finding about the truth about the murders and the machine's been used to kill the colonist. Cliffhanger number three is that the indigenous people have taken Joe
Yeah.
and they're gonna lead her in. Part four, the master's gonna shoot the doctor, and part five is the master's gonna kill Joe. All these cliffhangers are not great. It's hard to pick a number one. If anything,
If
like
I had to, maybe episode 5?
for me, I would pick number three.
Oh, no, actually, no, 3 where, like, Joe goes like, steps inside the city and the door closes behind her and she's bathed in darkness. That was good.
Yeah. I think that's a strong cliffhanger.
I mean, not that strong, but it's probably the best of the bunch.
No, but strong in terms of the comparison, where this is a graded scale, man. You know,
So, in talking about the polls, this is not an episode that has changed at all. This is according to Doctor Who magazine, this is the 21st ranked episode and has been since they started doing the poll. Has never changed.
and that makes sense, right? Like, it's not like this is a story that is you can imagine, like, this could be stories that is worse than this, but we've already watched the majority of the stories. The majority of the stories that we have watched so far is better
Yeah.
than this.
It's the lowest on the polls that we've watched so far.
And in case you're curious, Ben, something that we haven't been doing is that the last that was only for the last poll is that they did that for each doctor. But back in 2014 when they did this, we had the full list, so where it ranked in all of the eras.
Oh,
And in case you're curious, out of the at that point 241 episodes, this ranked as the 199th best episode.
okay.
So it's in the bottom of the bottom quarter of Doctor Who,
And it's in the bottom 5 of the 3rd Doctor.
which again makes sense.
Yikes for stuff that's worse than this.
Or I've not heard good things about. Well, I'm having a blank. What's the worst one, Ben?
I'm Monster.
High monster. I've heard that one's supposed to be one of the worst.
We will see, I suppose. It's known for a little bit.
Yeah, and we have a whole 'nother season. So, Ben, what would you rate this episode?
That's a good question. Let's see. I rated the Claws of Axos 5.9. I think I like this one just a tiny little bit more, not much more. I guess a 6. 6 seems high though. Maybe I rated the Claws of Axos too high.
That's hilarious. That you're just one it's point one.
Uh, no. I will give it a 6.1.
Okay, yeah, I'm giving this story a 5.6. This is god awful. I hated this story, Ben, and I'm looking forward to the demons.
Is it demons or daemons?
See,
I guess we'll see
I've
what
heard
they
multiple
say.
people say this. I we're just gonna say it's hard. I don't know because it's you could I think you might be able to say either one. I don't know if they're able to. I think the whole thing is that they couldn't because of like the BBC ruling and shit. They can't name it the demons, so they had to be the
That
demons.
makes sense.
But it's supposed to be the demons. But we're gonna find out next week.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to like, comment, subscribe if you're on YouTube. Give us a rating on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all that jazz. And join us next time for the Daemons or the Demons. Pick your poison. Have a great night, everybody.
Goodbye, everyone.